Can the death of one 23-year-old activist tip Europe's second-largest economy into deeper political instability just 1 year before a presidential election? In a country where turnout in the 2022 presidential runoff exceeded 71%, and far-right candidates now lead several 2027 polling scenarios, a single violent clash in Lyon has ignited a confrontation that could reshape France's political balance. This video examines how that killing became a catalyst in an already polarized republic. If this confrontation escalates, France risks entering its 2027 presidential cycle defined not by policy debates, but by security narratives and ideological confrontation. If it subsides, mainstream institutions may retain control over a political environment that has steadily fragmented since President Emmanuel Macron first disrupted the traditional left-right order in 2017. The stakes extend beyond France. As a nuclear power, European Union leader and permanent member of the UN Security Council, France's domestic stability influences European cohesion at a time of war in Ukraine and tension in the Middle East. The immediate trigger was the death of Quentin Deranque, a 23-year-old data science student who died 2 days after being beaten during street clashes in Lyon. Authorities arrested 11 people, including 2 aides linked to a lawmaker from La France Insoumise. The victim had reportedly joined a volunteer security detail for Nemesis, which was protesting outside a conference featuring Rima Hassan. Video circulated showing confrontations between roughly equal groups, before footage later captured multiple individuals kicking Deranque as he lay on the ground. He later collapsed and died from a severe head injury. Within hours, the political framing began. Jordan Bardella, president of National Rally, argued that the killing marked a turning point and attributed moral responsibility to Jean-Luc Mélenchon, citing links between his party and an anti-fascist group that officials say may have been involved. Mélenchon rejected collective blame, stating that his movement condemns violence and does not direct affiliated activist networks. The lawmaker whose aides were detained indicated that at least one staff member would be dismissed. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu publicly demanded that the far-left party restore internal order, prompting a sharp rebuttal. To understand why this incident resonates so widely, context matters. France has a long history of street mobilization and ideological confrontation, from the protests of May 1968 to anti-globalization demonstrations in the 1990s and more recent pension reform unrest. The far right and far left have frequently clashed physically at rallies. Analysts such as Marc Lazare of Sciences Po describe the current moment as a convergence of polarization and radicalization, intensified by international conflicts, particularly the war in Gaza, which has inflamed domestic debate. Electoral arithmetic sharpens the impact. In 2022, Mélenchon finished third in the first round with nearly 22% of the vote, narrowly missing the runoff. The National Rally's Marine Le Pen reached the second round with over 41% in the final tally against Macron. Since then, Bardella has consolidated party leadership, and polls suggest the far right could again top the first round in 2027. Local elections scheduled next month offer both camps an opportunity to test mobilization strength. Against that backdrop, Deranque's death becomes more than a criminal case. It becomes a symbolic weapon. The National Rally has spent years attempting to normalize its image, distancing itself from the legacy of its founder, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was convicted multiple times for inciting racial hatred. By framing the far left as violent and unfit to govern, the party seeks to invert the traditional cordon sanitaire strategy that once isolated it from mainstream coalitions. Bardella has called for political quarantine around France Unbowed, effectively urging other parties to exclude it from alliances. The irony is that similar tactics were historically used against the far right. Meanwhile, France Unbowed faces strategic pressure. Its base includes activists energized by social justice, climate, and foreign policy issues. However, association with militant street groups complicates its bid to appear as a credible governing alternative. A bomb threat that forced evacuation of its Paris headquarters days after the killing heightened perceptions of volatility, even though no explosive device was confirmed. The cycle of accusation and counter-accusation reinforces an atmosphere where security discourse overshadows policy. Consider the first what-if scenario. If prosecutors establish direct operational links between party structures and those arrested, institutional consequences could follow, potentially including restrictions on affiliated groups. That outcome would strengthen the National Rally's narrative and possibly shift undecided voters concerned about public order. It could also encourage other European populist movements to adopt similar law and order framing. Now consider a second possibility. If investigations conclude that the violence stemmed from spontaneous confrontation rather than organized direction, the political impact may soften. In that case, attempts to generalize guilt could be perceived as opportunistic, potentially consolidating left-wing voters who view the accusations as overreach. The contest would then revert to economic and social policy, areas where divisions remain profound but less explosive. The broader European dimension cannot be ignored. France is central to EU fiscal policy, defense integration, and support for Ukraine. A presidency dominated by either ideological extreme would alter Brussels' dynamics. Markets monitor such risks closely. Sovereign bond spreads can widen when investors perceive governance uncertainty. Social cohesion is also at stake. France's large urban centers have already experienced episodes of unrest, including the nationwide riots following the police shooting of a teenager in 2023. Additional polarization could strain policing and judicial capacity. Ultimately, Deranque's death illustrates how quickly local violence can be absorbed into national power struggles. France stands at a crossroads where demographic shifts, economic anxiety, and global conflicts intersect. The coming year will test whether institutions can contain polarization within democratic bounds, or whether rhetoric will further erode trust. Watch the judicial findings, the tone of local election campaigns, and the evolution of alliance strategies. In modern democracies, stability depends less on the absence of conflict than on the capacity to manage it without turning tragedy into permanent fracture.